Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Raquel Filmanowitz, and I am the Director of Economic Equity Advisory Group for BMO Harris Bank. It's my pleasure to invite you and welcome you to tonight's CHARLAs of Angeles Investors. You know, we've all read the headlines, and despite being the largest and fastest growing demographic, Hispanics face an uphill battle in trying to secure access to capital for their businesses. And it's my pleasure to share the fact that BMO Harris Bank has established an initiative called BMO Empower, where we aim to lend close to $1 billion over the next 5 years to Hispanic, women-owned, Black, managed and owned companies across the U.S. Check us out on our website, bmoharris.com/empower. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I want to commend Angeles Investors for continuing to put on such great programming that's on the pulse of what Latinos are doing and aiming to do. And I want to also thank our panelists, a group of really awesome women that are going to share their journey and share all the best practices and work that they're doing to advance Latinos in business. So thank you very much. I'll pass it over to Dalia.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's so great to hear about the work that BMO is doing through the BMO Empower initiative. We have a great panel for you today, and I'd like to jump right in and tell you about Angeles Investors before we get started. So Angeles Investors, as many of you know, is an angel investing group dedicated to finding, funding, and growing our most prominent Hispanic and Latinx ventures. Our ambitious goals are to grow to 250 Angeles, fund 50 startups, and invest $10 million by 2025. And we are well on our way to doing so. So this year alone, we have a goal of growing to 100 members. We're currently at 62 members, and we also have a goal of investing $2 million. And we'll do this by investing through our quarterly pitch nights, which you are welcome to attend. Please reach out to us, and through off-cycle investment opportunities between those quarterly pitch nights. So this year we have had up to 4 off-cycle investment opportunities between our 2 quarterly pitch nights. If you would like to learn more about becoming an Angeles member and joining our pitch nights and our educational series La Mesa, which we also offer in addition to our CHARLAs, please reach out to us at members@angelesinvestors.com to learn more. And finally, I just want to take an additional moment to thank our headline sponsor, BMO Harris, for all the work that they're doing and for their great support of Angeles Investors. Finally, I'd like to pass it over to Andrea from Techstars to get started on our CHARLA this evening. Andrea is a network catalyst at Techstars, and she will be hosting our CHARLA this evening. Andrea, take it away.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dalia. Hola, buenos días a todos. My name is Andrea Perdomo. I work at Techstars, and I am so excited to be here for this conversation to bring an incredible panel of 3 really inspirational founders. So, you know, I've actually connected with all of these founders before, and they're all fantastic. So I can't wait to be able to tell you all their journey. And I think we're going to have a very, very transparent conversation around what it's like to be an entrepreneur, what it's like to fundraise, and more importantly, within the ecosystem that we are in today, what it's like to be a Latina, trying to do all of those things on top of, the challenges of being an entrepreneur. So I am so excited to welcome all of our panelists who are going to join me here in a second. I see Carolina. Hi. Hello, look at us, 4 amazing Latinas having a conversation. I'm so excited to have you all here. So like we were chatting about a little bit earlier, we are really here to share stories, to share your journey with the world. I'm hoping that this will be an inspiration to any Latinas that are out there that are thinking about starting a company, or maybe you are right in the middle of it, and you're looking for help or advice. So, keep in mind that we are going, I have a list of prepared questions for our panelists, but we will also have time for Q&A at the end of our session. So as we're chatting, if there's any questions that you have in the audience about your own journey, or even about the journey of these incredible women, definitely bring that to us, and we'll ask the panelists those questions towards the end. But with that, I will start introducing each of our incredible panelists. And we'll start with, we have three women on the panel. We'll start with Carolina. You're at the top of my corner. If you could give us a quick intro and why you're here and why you showed up today.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. I am very passionate to help other women to kind of achieve their dreams. I have built my own company. I have worked for large companies, and I'm just here to kind of tell the story, inspire other women that they can actually do it. So now I have diverse women in tech. So I'm very excited to talk, and I have also found a company like Poncho Baby. So very excited to be here.
Amazing. Thank you, Carolina. And let's see who's on my second. Saskia, if you want to introduce yourself, that would be great. Oh, I think you're muted. Can you hear us? It's okay.
Yeah, of course I am.
It's the Zoom Live. We're all, we've all been there.
Every day, the same thing. Very excited to be here. My name is Saskia. I'm the founder and CEO of Fresh Bellies, which is a purpose-driven food company that makes healthy eating fun for kids of all ages. Prior to starting my own business, I was VP of marketing at the National Basketball Association, which is where I thought I would retire. It was my dream job. But then the entrepreneurial itch, was planted in my head, and I took the plunge.
Amazing. Yeah, I think all of us can attest to that. I call it's contagious, right? Entrepreneurship. And Desiree, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for having me. I am Desiree Vargas Reguli. I am a 2-time Latina founder here in Chicago. My first company was a company called Give Forward. It's now part of GoFundMe, and it was one of the first crowdfunding platforms in the world, actually. We helped people raise nearly $200 million for life-saving procedures and had about 30 million uniques a year, so a decently sized site. And then my second company, Parachute, is a kids activity marketplace, really focused on making parents' lives easier so they can easily discover and book activities. And both are related to Techstars, and so it's nice to have this community here and to be here and support other founders. But I'm currently also executive director of TechRise, which is a friends and family stage fund focused specifically on supporting Black and Latinx founders at the earliest stages in Chicago.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Desiree. So we're going to jump right in. I have, I think that there is a lot that we have all probably experienced at some point or another. But before we jump into the details of how to start a company and all of that good stuff, I want to ask, maybe I'll start with you, Carolina, but why did you become a founder? Like Saskia was saying, it's something that was contagious, or she caught the bug for it. But why did you decide to become an entrepreneur and start your own company?
So that is a good question. So I worked for big companies like Oracle, Yahoo, and Citibank, and I had built products, digital products for different companies. And then when I had my second daughter, it actually inspired me to create products for mama and babies, because I felt there was a lack of innovation when it comes to moms who wanted to breastfeed, as well as having products that were organic. And that kind of inspired me I look at the marketplace, there was nothing that I wanted, like a breastfeeding cover, and I decided, let me just do it. And that moved it to a product, it got patented, the company got trademark, and a company came international from Japan, the Middle East, Europe, and all over the world. So it was just really fascinating just to see you could do it and have people who felt like it was incredible. And after having the patent, it just kind of gave me the feeling like it's something that I can actually be unique. And that was kind of the beginning. I came, my daughters inspired me to launch a business. So it was very exciting.
That's amazing. And what about for you, Saskia? I know it says you said you thought you were going to retire in this other job, and then you found yourself starting a company. So what kind of inspired that transition?
Yeah, for me, it was having kids. I was born and raised in South America, in Ecuador, and I grew up around food very differently. Then I realized kids were being fed here, and I only started paying attention to it when I had children. And so when I turned to the food industry to now start feeding my kids what was convenient and on the shelf, I realized that there was nothing for me. There was nothing I wanted to buy, and there was a huge need in the market for savory foods and foods that helped children start training their palates to the foods we expect them to eat as they got older. For me, it was really, there was a need for me that I knew was much bigger than myself and my own girls. And I wanted to play a difference in combating childhood obesity and getting kids on a healthier path to eating than we had been doing for the last few decades.
Yeah. So it sounds like both Carolina and Saskia, both of you were very much inspired by your own lived experiences, right, to really kick this first company off. What about for you, Desiree? I know you've had a ton of success with now 2 companies, but what kind of inspired you to jump into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I definitely had no intention of being an entrepreneur. I was raised by a single mom, and I was told, like, get into the best college you can so that you can get the best job you can, and then, try to make a life for yourself. And that was my plan. And I fell in love with the concept of corporate social responsibility in 2003. So I thought, I'll go work at a nonprofit and then go to business school, and hopefully Coca-Cola or Starbucks will hire me one day. But when I was doing my nonprofit job, which ended up being at the Kauffman Foundation, I discovered the power of entrepreneurship as a driver of economic development and of equity and of generational wealth. And I conceptually fell in love with it, but I didn't actually have an idea. And then Hurricane Katrina hit, and I just saw, as an insider's view of what was happening in philanthropy. And I thought, individual donors are the backbone of American philanthropy, but we have very little say in where that money goes. And why can't people just give to people? And that was really kind of the beginning of what ended up becoming Give Forward. But it took me 18 months to get up the courage to actually commit to doing it, because I wasn't an engineer or developer. I was a Latin American studies major, and I had no money. I obviously didn't come from money, and I had no plans of how I could actually become, the next Mark Zuckerberg at the time. So it was a very daunting task. And eventually, the voice in my head became too strong, and I couldn't stop thinking about this business that just had to exist in the world. And so I finally kind of leapt and hoped that the net would appear, and it did in many ways.
No, that's amazing. And you started to touch on something which I think is really key, which is, right, you kind of almost don't know what you're getting yourself into until you take that leap. And so I'm curious, and I'll just open this up to any of you 3, but what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome in order to commit to? So right, like Carolina was saying, even there's an idea, but then that step from idea to jumping in can be a very scary one. So what was maybe one example of a hurdle that you faced during that part of the journey? I'm happy to. Saskia, do you want to go?
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest hurdles was taking a pay cut. So we were a dual income home. My husband and I both worked. I had a really good career that I had built over 16 years. And I knew that once I started the business, I was not going to be taking a paycheck for, I didn't know how long, until we, raised money, started generating revenue. So we went from being a dual income home to a single income home, and that was incredibly straining on our family. And even over the years, it wasn't like the following year I was making what I was making in my corporate life. It took time to build that up. And so there was a lot of bootstrapping and a lot of sacrifices that we had to make as a family to get it going. And that we still have to make today, even, 5 years into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very, very big reality, right? And Desiree was kind of talking about this a little bit too of, how do you start paying for it? How do you have a great idea, but then how do you start to prove to the world that it's something that needs to exist? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that too, Desiree. What was a hurdle that you faced as you were starting your own company?
Yeah, I think the hurdles are financial, intellectual, emotional, and there's so many different factors, especially when you create all these reasons why you shouldn't, right? Someone with better tech abilities is going to do this, or someone who's better well-funded is going to do it. And for me, in the beginning, I watched Change.org launch, and they were supposed to have kind of a fundraising component, and it ended up becoming what they are, which is very successful. And in Chicago, we had The Point, which ended up becoming Groupon, but they started with $6 million, and they were going to have a crowdfunding component. It wasn't called that then. They were going to have a fundraising component. So I kept like hearing these stories of these, you know, young white men who were funded by VCs, and I thought, well, they're going to get there first, and there's no way I can do it. And the voice in my head was pretty strong. And then truly one day I was like, why not me? Why can't I be the one to do this? They're not building what I have in my mind, and I'm going to figure out a way. And I'll put business school, aside and think about this as an alternative MBA, and hopefully I'll learn a lot more. But I think depending on what your background is and where you come from, like the opportunity costs of making this decision are meaningful, and it's a very big hurdle to overcome. My mother didn't go to college, my dad didn't go to college, so the idea of me passing up this kind of Yale degree to go make no money and wait tables at night to build my dream was scary from a family perspective and a personal perspective. I think once you get bitten, it's very hard to shake the entrepreneurial bug, and it had to exist, so I had to build it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it comes with sacrifices, right? I know that's something I talk about all the time, which is as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to make sacrifices. So what are the boundaries that you're going to set for yourself to take control of what those sacrifices are and what you're going to actually put out there? Carolina, anything else to add on maybe what was a hurdle that you faced when you started your company?
Yeah, so in my case, I think, and this is a very relevant question across the board especially for women or anybody who wants to join do their own company. In the way that I did it, I was in the corporate world. So I did tons of savings. I was actually building the prototyping. I mean, my expertise has been in product and digital business, building business in top of the digital world. So I did a lot of prototyping. I tested, rapid testing, until it got to the point that I had a lot of people who wanted the product. Cedars-Sinai Hospital here in LA really loved the product, wanted to buy the product. And then I realized, oh my God, this is serious. This is not anymore and I just did a leap of faith, and I decided to jump in and did everything and the other thing it was challenging for me is because I had been on the corporate world, but it was digital. And I was actually moving into manufacturing products and fabrics. So I have to get fabrics from Japan and different parts in Asia until I got the right fabric. So it's definitely a daunting experience, but you just have, they are saying you just had to get a leap of faith and go for it. And create a village too, I feel, because there is a lot of challenges that you have, but if you build these women who are in certain industry and your community, just start kind of building this community that will help you move you forward.
Yeah, no, and Carolina, I think you touched on two things, which is you said, right, you started to kind of build your own prototype. Because one of the next questions I was going to ask is how did you get started, right? Like you're in it, you're fully involved, and you just took this leap. But how do you really start to build it out? And so you said you were kind of building out that, some prototypes and testing it out with friends and family. So I'm curious from you, Saskia, is that a similar approach that you took of like making food in your house and having your friends test it? Like maybe walk us through what that first few months or first year looked like.
Yeah, and I was actually going to add to the prior question that, there's the hurdle of getting started, but then once you're in it, there's a hurdle every day.
Yes.
It's not like you get over the initial hurdle and then it's all, smooth sailing after that. It's like every day, every week, every month, there's another hurdle. Every year, there are multiple hurdles.
Every hour, right? Yeah, there's every day. It's always different too, and you never know what you're going to hit that day.
So I don't want people to have this false narrative that once you get over the initial hump, then it's not unfortunately how it works. But yeah, so we, when I decided to start the food business, I obviously had cooked in my own kitchen. I had never cooked or made food commercially. And there were a lot of laws and rules and permits that had to happen to even get to the first stage. And so I partnered with a good friend of mine who's an executive chef, CIA trained, who had all the experience there. I just started networking. I connected with this woman who owned a commercial kitchen in Mamaroneck, and she connected me with the USDA department, who then helped me get all the paperwork and things that I needed on board. And so I have, even throughout my corporate career, I've had this mentality or sort of mantra of hire for your weaknesses. So you should know your strengths, but then you should also know where you need the help and when you need people to complement you. And so I knew I didn't know the food industry. I'm good at marketing. I'm good at consumer, marketing, but food manufacturing was not my thing. So I hired the chef. I tapped into someone who had been doing food manufacturing for 30 plus years and sold his business to Hanover Foods, brought him on board really early on with equity to help us find a manufacturer, figure out how to get this product and this prototype into the market in a package that would work and on the shelves. And so CFO from Kraft Foods, who helped us do all the modeling once we decided that we were going to go out and raise money and it wasn't going to be a mom and pop business. So as soon as I knew this is more than just farmers markets, this is really something I want to take nationally and eventually exit, I started tapping into the people I needed to bring on board to help me take my idea to a final product that would eventually be on a store shelf somewhere. But I hired for that. I just knew what I didn't know, and I needed to surround myself with people that could get me there where I needed to go.
Yeah, and I think you and Carolina just touched on something, which is like the humility that has to come with entrepreneurship, right? Of having like, who is that village that's behind you, whether it's friends, family, right? A community, a network, but also your team, and who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with that are there to help you. Because I think to your point, Saskia, like in the entrepreneurship journey, one, every day is different. There's so many hurdles that we're having to overcome. And a lot of times it can feel really lonely too. So I'm curious, and I'll open this up to any of you, but what were some of the communities that you leaned into, or, how did you kind of get that support that you needed as an entrepreneur to keep going, even past all the hurdles and all the challenges that happen daily?
I'll jump in here. I think that one of the things that we're all touching on, and even though I was earlier in my career when I started Give Forward, then it sounds, or less experience, I should say, in my career than the two of you were. I think when founders need things, it's usually capital, networks, and knowledge, and the combination of those things can happen at different phases of your life in different ways. But as a first-time founder, and if you don't have easy access to the networks and knowledge, I think that it is when it becomes the most isolating and lonely space, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't actually know what step is next, and you don't know who to ask about what step is next. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that people who are building companies outside of major cities where there is a vibrant tech ecosystem are living in a version of what we were living in here in Chicago in 2007, which is that there was no tech startup ecosystem. There was no club of people. There was no 1871. And so, it was and it was kind of predated Starbucks, honestly, the coffee house scene. So it was really challenging to find people to talk to and very hard to find investors. And LinkedIn wasn't as robust. But now I think that it's almost your fault if you can't find community, because there are organizations, like there's groups like Eureka where you can go and find a national community of people supporting early stage founders. And there are so many virtual groups and accelerators and workshops. And so I guess, I'm putting the burden on founders now, but saying because there's so much that exists, it's up to you to go find the people that are your tribe, and they don't necessarily have to live in your city or even be building the same kind of industry that you are, but going and finding them, online is probably the best place, within Slack channels, within LinkedIn, within Techstars.
Yeah, and there are so many communities, right, that do exist. And I'm curious too, like around, part of what we see a lot, and even at Techstars, right, is kind of this mentorship of finding other founders that maybe are going through something similar, or a mentor who's maybe been through it before. And to kind of highlight what you were saying, Desiree, too, right? Like there is a plethora of, information out there and groups. But I'm curious to hear from maybe Carolina and Saskia, like how did you find those people? How did you find that tribe to help and support you along the way?
So in my case, this is it was very unique because I was totally in a new industry altogether. I was totally the tech. It's kind of reverse because most of the people have the experience on the field of food, whatever, and they moved digital. I was moving from digital to actual products. So I feel like it's so important to be humble, but just real. like, I feel like whatever accomplished you feel you do, I think being humble and empowering other women is very key, to be very honest. And I was very lucky as I was actually doing trade shows in Vegas, as well as in different cities in New York. I met wonderful women who were business founders of very successful companies. And one thing I will have to say is that they were incredible supporters of me, of the business. They felt it was really had great potential. And then I have multiple, some that were actually experts on different kind of the baby industry or of moms. And basically we did a lot of collaboration. They knew different things about marketing. So it was a tremendous amount of teamwork. So I would say that community was incredible. So I'm totally grateful. And I also feel like beyond the network, the people who actually manufacture my products, I got people here in LA that manufacture the products. I feel also the family, and I have been fortunate to having a wonderful husband who has been incredible through all this, from being on the corporate world, to have Poncho Baby, as well as now where I'm actually advising other companies like Aspiration Building, a new credit card, and digital products. I feel like having the family and the foundation for the support is incredible. So yeah, so I feel I have been very fortunate.
That's great.
But for us, the incubators that we've been a part of have really been pivotal moments in our trajectory, for me, at least as a founder, and also for us as a business. So Chobani Incubator is something that we were a part of in 2018, and it really changed my experience as a founder completely. Many of the companies that were in that cohort with me are now people I call friends, like really good friends. Mm-hmm. I can text at any minute, at any time of the day with a question or a comment, or just to vent and say today was the pits, and they're there. And to have that kind of camaraderie with somebody who's going through it with you is pretty incredible. And so that type of founder network is really valuable to have. It's also just like an extended resource, especially at the beginning. You're bootstrapping, you're a small team, you don't have a lot of resources, and so to have this extended family, some companies are 3 years ahead of you, some a little bit behind, but you have this extended network where you can ask questions and bounce ideas off is incredible. And now we're part of the Goldman Sachs entrepreneur cohort that we just selected for, and that's another group of founders now that I get to tap into and bring into my network and start the conversation with. So mentorship is important, and I have advisors and mentors that we've had throughout the whole thing, but it's a completely different relationship than the founder experience and communication and networking. So I do highly recommend, when you're in it, to find those colleagues that are in it with you and know exactly what you're talking about when you're going through a high and when you're going through a low, because I don't think anyone else understands it but a founder.
Yeah.
Who has gone through it themselves.
No, that's so true. And congratulations on that, by the way. That's so exciting. Yeah, and you kind of set up for the next part of the conversation, which I think is something that, to some of the stats that were being read earlier, like when you look at the capital that's being accessed by founders of color, specifically women of color, it's less than 1% of VC capital that's going to those founders. And so I want to touch on that with all of you, right? Like I heard bootstrapping, I heard like being a part of different incubators or different programs to help you with funding. But maybe talk a little bit about that. How did you find the financial support and the capital to start your business? And if you did do the VC route, like what advice do you have for other Latinas that are trying to do the same thing and are, probably navigating what I navigated personally, which was a lot of rejection? So I'm just curious to hear from you all.
I'm happy to jump into this one. I was building a social venture in Chicago, which is historically kind of a fintech, SaaS, and food delivery city. So the idea of a consumer social venture was very hard to fund. And I basically got laughed out of the room. People were like, why would people give to people without a tax deduction? I just don't understand the business. And I think a big part of that was that I was building a business and solving a problem that many, older white male rich investors had never experienced before, which was what it felt like to be $300 short that month to pay your bills because of a hospital bill. And so when investors can't relate to the problem, it's very hard for them to invest early because they just don't understand the problem to be solved. And so I think that is a challenge that we face as a community, that often first-time founders especially are solving problems that you personally know really well. And so the audience for your pitch might not. And so it's really important, I think, that you look for early supporters who personally understand the problem. And part of that happens from networking and storytelling, telling everyone you know what you're working on. But for me, I couldn't find anyone to invest in the company. And so I waited tables at night and I worked on it during the day. And I used credit cards to pay for the first version of my site, which most people wouldn't recommend. And I probably don't recommend it either. But when you have a vision and you need to build it, like sometimes you just do what you have to do. But I think that's the reason that we see the numbers where they are, which is that, a typical founder usually has access to about $110,000 in first check capital, whether that's personal wealth or along an extended line of credit because of just where they are financially. But a typical Black or Latinx founder has access to somewhere between $5,000 and $35,000. And so the starting line is in a very, very different place, which puts us at a disadvantage when we're going out to pitch, for that pre-seed and seed round. And so I think it's critical for us to get creative around what other forms of financing are there, including, crowdfunding, and not just equity crowdfunding, but also, creating our own round of friends and family by putting together either Kickstarters or Indiegogos or something like that, because the people that love you and support you will probably give you $100, and you probably have enough of those people in your network. And for me, when I was building Give Forward, I was like, I need to eat our own dog food. So I threw these tiny parties in New York and Chicago and Kansas City, where I'm from, and crowdfunded before it was a thing at, these bars with wristband parties. And that's where I got, $15,000 of the first startup capital that I had, in addition to the credit card. So I do think it's our job to get creative. Ultimately, we ended up getting into what became part of Techstars in Chicago. And, we did get to pitch investors. But honestly, it wasn't until David Cohen, who was in Colorado, said he was going to invest, that local Chicago VCs and angels started to pay attention to us. And so finding that first person to say yes and be your anchor is also a really critical first step if you are a venture track business. But we're not all venture track. Some of us have built really amazing lifestyle businesses and should. And how much you raise is not the metric of success. It's what you build and what you scale.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to some of the stats that you shared too, like the VC track is, it's hard, right? Because the odds are really kind of working against you. And in many cases, maybe you don't need that capital and you can get creative. Or, I had our investors would always say, you all are so scrappy. We're like, well, we have no choice.
No choice.
Right? Like that, thank you. That's great. But we have no choice. And so I'm curious, I don't know, Saskia and Carolina, what was your experience fundraising or getting the capital that you needed to get going?
Yeah, so I put in, I almost emptied my 401k to start the business because, we were not a wealthy family. I was not taking a paycheck and I needed some money to get the business going and to sustain the family while we were going from 2 to 1 income home. So after we did that and we realized, okay, well, there's an opportunity here and we really do want to take this. We want to build this to be an exit in X amount of years. I knew we needed external capital. There was just nowhere else where we could go into any savings where we could pull out our own money. And so we raised, I pitched every single angel network in New York before. I just had a farmer's market product and my friends laugh at me now because I would show up with my daughter's lunchbox and the jars in there. That was my pitch. You name it, Golden Seas, New York Angels, all of them. I applied online. They invited me to pitch. And I started building a pretty significant network out of it. They didn't invest. Some of them introduced me to people who did end up investing. So it just became this process of, you should meet this person, you should talk to this person, I know this other person. And so that got us started. But the real money that came in when we were fundraising our first round, which was our seed, was through someone I knew. So someone I knew through college had a family office, and he had a group of family offices that he had co-invested with on multiple businesses. And they came into our seed. They led that round. Then they came into our A and led that round. And they've been active investors since. They've done our convertible note. So we've raised capital very non-traditionally, especially in food, where VCs come in really early. We did not do that. We raised with angels, syndicates, family offices, and that's it. In our convertible note that we did towards the early this year, towards the end of last year, was the first time that we brought a VC, and it was a Hispanic VC, which is Vamos Ventures. It's our first institutional investor, and now we're gearing up for our first institutional round, which we hope to launch at the end of this year once we finalize the Goldman Sachs program. So we'll officially go to market then. And it's, we've had preliminary conversations with VCs, and it's completely different than family offices and high net worth individuals. It's a whole other ballgame. They're just focused on different things. Sometimes values are not aligned, and it's hard, because you need the money. You need to go that route to sort of get to the exit that you need to, that you're building the business for. But I almost feel like there's a little bit of a trade-off sometimes with what you need to give up to get into that space.
Yeah, and I think both of you just touched right on optionality, right? How there isn't actually one track, and that's actually what I was hoping that you would kind of bring to the table, which is that the narrative that we see for what's a startup and who's a successful entrepreneur, there's a ton of different narratives. There's a ton of different paths to get to that success. And so, Carolina, I don't know if you had anything else to add on the funding, but how did that go for you?
She frozen.
Oh, can she hear me? No? Okay, it's okay. We will move on to the next question. But yeah, so one of, I think that's again, like the really exciting part about being able to talk to other founders, and why it's so great to have them around you as advisors or just as a group that you can talk to, is because everybody does have a different path, and funding is a big piece of it. So I'm curious, we're here to really talk about the power of the Latinx community. Like, how did the Latinx community play a role in
like the crowdfunding campaigns that I talked about, where someone gave us a meaningful check and we were able to use it for marketing and kind of some silly promotional marketing, but it ended up being very important to us kind of psychologically and for the early customer acquisition of the business. So that was the very beginning. But I think in Chicago, at least within our tech community, the Latinx community just hadn't had much presence. And so it really isn't until recently that we've started to establish a community and come together and talked more about how we can support each other. It's been kind of lone wolves within the broader ecosystem, and it's definitely an opportunity for improvement here in Chicago. And we do have a Latinx accelerator that's at 1871, and so glad that we're welcoming Latinos from across the country now to participate in that virtually, so that we can create an even stronger community. But unfortunately, it really wasn't as much of an emphasis for me, and just because of kind of the nature of what was happening in our ecosystem here.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? And I know, Saskia, you said Vamos Ventures just closed around with you all, but any other influence from that community in your entrepreneurship journey?
So our lead investors, which is these groups of family offices that I mentioned, they're all Latin American. So some are U.S. residents, some don't live here, but they're all Latin American. And so it's interesting because it is a majority of the chunk of our business after myself. What's interesting is that only in recent years have I started realizing how important. So as there's more of a focus on minority-owned businesses, Hispanic businesses, female businesses, this, at least in the food industry, plays a big role in being on the shelf, the retailer supporting you, calling you out as a minority-owned businesses. And so only in the last, I would say, 2 years, have I started to pay more attention to my cap table. And, how, can we get Hispanic minority certified? And what do I need to get there? Are we at least 51% Hispanic owned? And so even in the convertible note, and as we're gearing up for the next round, a big focus of mine is, what minority investors are we bringing in? Are there other funds like Vamos Ventures that just, that are minority investors that just focus on Hispanic and Black founders? How can we diversify the table to be a true representation of who we are? And so it's not just me, the founder, who's Latin, but there's a whole group of investors and community supporting the business that makes up a majority of ownership.
Yeah.
So I've been a lot more focused on it, I would say, in the last 2 years. I wasn't originally.
No, I think that's great. Carolina, are you back?
I'm back.
You
Yes.
can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I would say, like, as we were talking about that, Angels is actually a very, well, actually, you know, some of the founders. It's actually all led by like a Hispanic community who are actually want to do support other businesses. So it's interesting enough. I know them, and I was kind of interested that now I started the conversation that they are part of this conversation. So I think it's key. And I also, I mean, one thing is, like, I have been on the tech world, and I'm 1 or 2%, only 2% of women in tech are female and Latinas. So there are kind of two things that we have for it. It's like not just the fact that we are in entrepreneurship world, but also in tech. I'm one of the very few Latinas in business when it comes to tech. So I feel like it's so important for us to inspire other women to found the companies, but as well as other girls and young Latinas to get into tech world, because it's key. It's key for all these businesses. The digital world is here, and we need to figure out how to get to customers.
Yeah, and how to, right, I think to your point, like how, and this is partially why we're all here, right, is to hopefully be able to inspire other Latinas to do this, to learn, to kind of follow their dreams and realize that there are people that look like us that are doing this work. But I'm curious, and Carolina, you actually set me up perfectly for this, which is like, what opportunities do you see for Latinas today? And I think more specifically, right, and Saskia was talking about this a little bit earlier, which is that there has been a bit of a change in the focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, right? What took so long, I don't know. It drives me crazy. It's frustrating, but at least, you know, there is a little bit more progress that we're seeing happen quicker. But I'm curious on that side, like, what are the opportunities that you are seeing, or maybe some signs of hope that the last few years have given us as it relates to Latinas getting into tech and getting into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think Latinas have a very unique position to grow. Number one, a Latino community has been growing in the US tremendously, and it's going to keep growing. I also feel that one thing is, I feel like we have to turn around and look at us, like, embrace the power that we have, not just as a woman, but also as a Latina. The fact that we are coming with multicultural environment make us look at the world globally from the beginning. It's like multi-language. I think I will empower women here, because there are a lot of businesses out there. Some people have not even thought about it, but because they have no exposed, but that doesn't mean that we don't have potential. We actually could have tremendous potential in so many industries, that we just need to believe more in ourselves, and we have to empower other women. So I feel like that is one thing that we need to do better, is in terms of being confident about, like, we could do it. Number two is to be, to add all these assets, because any woman, I will tell you, like, across the board, if you have a Latina on the table, in the tech world, in the fundraising world, in the VC world, they have worked so hard, triple the work that I had done to get there. So the fact, and also we have to embrace it, like, there are so many amazing mentors and men who are there also to support. And so I feel that it's across the board. We just need to kind of own it, like, we could do it. And I feel like as soon as we are there, there are so many more opportunities for thinking global, embracing our culture to create new products, to market our new products. We are multi-language, so, like, we have so much assets that we have to feel like we have them, embrace them as we are building unique products, and unique services across the board. So I feel like you have to turn the coin from, like, oh my God, we have a small percentage, to see it like that means that we have, like, we can grow even more, because we are, Sasha was saying, they need more women. There are a lot of things that have money for women in tech, women in businesses. We just have to be out there and find and help other women to find the resources.
Yeah. Well, in Chicago, we're 30% Latinx. And so we actually represent a very big percentage of our community. But I run this 30-week pitch competition. Like every week we have a pitch competition, and we award between $20,000 and $50,000 to early stage founders. And we are struggling to get Latinas to apply. And I think that is one of the biggest opportunities, is for us to, make sure that we who are out there already doing this are going out and seeking out other women who have ideas and encouraging them along the way, and not waiting for them to find us to mentor them, but actually being proactive about going and finding other women to support. Because I think part of it is seeing panels like this, but then part of it is, the like everyday kind of communication and sharing of what we're doing and what we're working on, because, word of mouth is such an important part of, our distribution of knowledge in our culture. But I also think that we are in a very incredibly unique time where the funding opportunities for women to take that leap and experiment, it's bigger than it's ever been before. And now is the time. If you have an idea in your head, now is the time to learn what you need to get in front of those early investors, or in front of the accelerator, or anything, and just put yourself out there and see what happens, because it's so worth the risk. And it's really not that big of a risk, right? If you do it and you love it, then you'll spend the rest of your life loving every day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, I have to kind of pull from what you both said, which is the opportunity, right? And I think that that's something that is very true. Like, and I've been to a lot of conversations where like there are challenges, right? There's challenges to doing anything. Like there are a lot of obstacles that you do have to overcome. But to Cato's point, and Desiree, right, there's so much opportunity. And I think something that really stood out from what you all said is this ability and kind of this the place in which you could go in to really embrace who you are, and bringing that to the table, and realizing that's actually a competitive advantage to have the lived experiences that all of you have had, and bringing that into your businesses actually does make you the right person to start your company, right? Like it actually is, it de-risks your business because it's you. And so I just think that that's super, super important. Saskia, I don't know if you have anything to add on that front. I mean, hopefully we have a ton of people listening in, like, this is kind of our time to inspire them to, my mom actually always said, soñar no cuesta nada, which is like dreaming doesn't cost anything. And I think about that all the time in my entrepreneurship career. I'm like, you're right. I have an idea book, right? Like, when am I going to launch that idea? But yeah, Saskia, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that the opportunity now for Latinas, I agree, Desiree touched on this, so I agree with her, is that a lot more doors will open for you today that maybe wouldn't have opened a year ago, even, 2 years ago. So I think that's great. Like you're able to now make connections with people, with high-level people, investors, VC funds that would have never spoken to you if they didn't know you, or if you didn't come through a warm referral, or you weren't introduced through the right people. So I think that's a huge opportunity. It's like people want to talk to you today, and you should leverage that. It's the right time. On the flip side of that, I think, I don't want to say that and then leave it out there like it's now easy to do it, and it's now easy to raise money. I think, we have a group of founders, Black and Brown founders, that I commiserate with, and that we just are in the same circle. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is there's a lot more conversation happening, and there are a lot more meetings happening. But at the end of the day, the numbers haven't changed. And it's almost like a lot of these VCs are trying to take the conversations to check a box, but the checks are still being written to the people they've always written it to. And so between where we were and where we are now, it's better. But there's a long way to go before those checks are being written in a significant way to minority founders and Latina founders. And so I think having that mindset, knowing that, yes, you'll be able to talk to the right people now, and you'll be in front of in the right space, doesn't mean it's going to be easy or you're going to get the money. Right. Because there's still a lot of work that needs to get done to get there. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality we live in.
Yeah. I think, Saskia, your story is really inspiring because you did exactly what you should do, right? Which is go and find the people to surround you to help complement what you bring to the table. And so, entrepreneurship doesn't have to be this solo entrepreneur story. It can be the story of building a founding team that knows exactly how to get your vision into the world. And so, I think that relinquishing early some of that ownership and bringing people into that vision and letting that vision live outside of your brain and in the collective brains of your founding team, actually, and then you yourself practice bringing diverse people together, backgrounds, mindset, race, sexual preference, whatever that means for you. I mean, that I think can become the winning scenario where that funding round can happen more quickly if you have more people building with you from the very beginning.
Yeah. And I think all of us here, like we're paving, I always think of it this way. It's like we're paving the path for the next generation of Latinas. And then, it might be a tiny bit easier, but then they're going to have their own challenges and struggles and they're going to pave the path for the next. And so, it's really like, how do you create that ripple effect that has exponential change and hopefully happens faster? But, I think there is kind of a reality to building a company is just hard, right? Like no matter what color you are or who you are, like it's just hard to build a company and to make it successful and scale. So with that, I know we have a few minutes left, but I want to maybe ask each of you for final thoughts around, for the people that are listening that are thinking about starting a company. We'll do one of two things. Either what's the biggest lesson that you've learned that you don't want other people to make the same mistake? Or like what's some advice that you have for entrepreneurs that are listening to the call? Carolina, maybe we'll go with you first.
Okay. Yeah, I think I want to say two things. Number one, that I want people to think about the fact of building something. It doesn't have to, you don't have to feel like to be successful, VC has to come first. In my case, it was self-funded company. And that's the way that I wanted to do it. So it's a different entrepreneur, have different path, and you might find your own. So I would say, try to just make sure that when you are thinking about a product, do prototyping and start kind of assessing the market, because the market is something, it changes all the time. You might create a product right now, and then I have products were built very unique in the market, and next time in the market, when I was actually going to Vegas to show my products, some big company have actually copied the product and the colors. So just be kind of agile, because that is how the tech company have grown so fast, is test quickly and make sure that you just adjust to the market, because whenever you think that you got it, things are changing. So you have the mentality that you are okay with changes and adapting, that would actually take you very far.
Yeah, I love that. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
All right,
I would say two. So 2 lessons learned. One is don't be afraid to ask for help. I had a really hard time with this at the beginning, just putting myself out there, asking for help, getting questions answered, going to people who I knew might have the answer, just asking for people to give their time and their knowledge. Don't be afraid to do that, because you'd be surprised how willing people are to just give this knowledge that they have, that they want to pay back, because someone at some point did it for them. And those are really important steps that you need to take to get to where you need to go. So just ask for help. And if at worst case scenario, the answer is no, well, then you move on to the next person and ask for help again. But that's super important. Just ask for help. And then I think the other lesson learned, and this, one of my mentors has said it to me for years, even throughout my corporate career, but it's even more meaningful now as a founder, which is celebrate the wins, even the small ones, big and small. Every single win as an entrepreneur is a win and is an incredible milestone and accomplishment. And sometimes we're moving so fast that we forget. We just like move on to the next thing and try to get the next thing accomplished. And it's really important that you stop and acknowledge how far you've gotten and what you've been able to accomplish before you move on to the next thing. It's almost like you need that energy to recharge yourself and inspire you to get to the next step that you need to go to.
Yeah, I love both of those. That's great. Desiree, final thoughts. We have 30 seconds or so here.
Sure. Kind of related to the same thing. I think, sometimes founders are afraid people will steal their idea if they talk about it too much. But the second you go to market, a customer gets to experience your idea. And so they could take it if they wanted to. So don't be afraid to tell everyone you know what you're working on, because you never know who can help you, to Saskia's point. And so our first big fundraiser on Give Forward happened because I was waiting tables and told someone what I was working on, and they ended up putting something on the platform. So you just never know. And then the other piece of this is maybe a sad part of it, or like just a realistic thing, is that you are not your company, and that no matter what happens with this first company, you have the opportunity to go on and build other things. And this is just part of your journey as a founder. And once you become a founder, you are always a founder. You're always problem solving and creating new opportunities. And whether you do that, inside of the company that you're building, or later, in some other place, like, remember that what you're building is for the world, but you are not that thing. And it allows you to bring more people in early and share that vision and share those wins and share those successes, but also share the burden. And that's an important part of this journey too.
Yeah, no, I love that, Desiree, right? Like, be proud of what you've built, but don't feel like you're defined by it, right? Because that feeling can eat you alive as an entrepreneur. Well, this has been so fantastic. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation. I think it's just the beginning. Hopefully we can have more of these charlas going forward. And then hopefully, if you were listening, you were taking notes, because all the advice that these women just gave is dead on. So, hopefully this was something that inspired you. We're here, so if you do ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But with that, thank you to our panelists for their time. Really, really appreciate everything that you've done, and you've inspired me today. So thank you for everything. And I will kick it over to Dalia to close us off. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That was such an amazing panel. I'm so excited our guests got to hear that live conversation today. I know you inspired so many more people this evening. Andrea, thank you again for being our host. We really appreciate you all giving your time to the Angeles investors community and beyond. So guests, if you are interested in learning more about anyone on the panel or Angeles investors, please don't hesitate to reach out to members at angelesinvestors.com to be a part of our community. And again, thank you all for your time this evening, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.